Thank you for joining us on the Right of Way Report, a podcast by Pykoff OTA. You can join us here every Monday morning at 10 a.m., where we will bring you updates on legislation, litigation, and landowner information.
Good morning, Tassie.
Good morning, Amy.
How are you today?
I'm good. Loving this 100-degree weather, raring to go.
Yeah, this is the kind of weather that you don't go outside. Just stay inside and hope your air conditioning continues to work. And so today, Tassie said she'd come on and talk to us about a lot of different items. So she's an expert in everything corruption and anthropology, and so has some good insights about some of the topics we'll talk about. And we're going to probably start our conversation about the OU president going to the Turnpike Authority board meeting last week and cheerleading 2 extra interchanges on the southern extension, and then talk about the city council meeting, which will be tomorrow, that we need everybody to attend, and we'll talk more about that. And then some just comments about the OTA steamrolling the citizens faster and faster as they try to get by without having the rule of law stop them. And then we'll end with just a reminder that you've got some choices to make in 15 days in that August 25th primary runoff on both the Republican and the Democrat side. So if you don't know who you're going to vote for, you need to start thinking about that right now. So, Tassie, just as we're about to go back to the semester in midsummer, right when everyone's trying to have a nice last vacation before their kids start back, before they go back to school, the University of Oklahoma president comes out at the OTA board meeting and then in several different news organizations and cheerleads the fact that for economic development purposes, the city of Norman needs to have 2 additional interchanges on the proposed southern extension that has not been built yet, and that only 1 home has been acquired on, and that is not as certain that it will be built because we're still fighting that. And he says that Route 9 is not a good enough interchange, and I-77, State Highway 77 is not good enough. He wants 2 more on Alameda and I think Rock Creek. And he says, well, it's not going to take any more people's homes, and is making these decisions on high. Let's start talking about that.
I think the whole city needs to talk about this. I will preface my comments by saying I am an employee of the University of Oklahoma. I speak only for myself at this moment. If we had a little subtitle that could pop up that says, like, please don't fire me for having an opinion on these issues, because it is, in my opinion, really unprecedented. And I remain deeply bewildered. First of all, why, if the university, is the president speaking for himself? Is he speaking for the university? If he's making a pitch for interchanges, why isn't he talking to the city? Why isn't he speaking to citizens who will be impacted by these interchanges? And where did he get his expertise in urban planning? Because this seems like a very short-sighted, self-interested request with no consideration of the larger potential impact in terms of the financial impact, the environmental impact, just there's a psychological impact, I think, on citizens who now feel doubly intimidated that someone as powerful as the OU president is teaming up with the Turnpike Authority, which does not have any guardrails and has what appears to be complete license to take any property they want at any time for any reason, and it doesn't have to be legal. And so I just, if I were an advisor to the university, which I am not in any way, I would just ask them, have you really thought about the larger impact of these statements on the community? Like, how do you feel about now being cast as one of the villains in this story when honestly everybody loves OU? I really enjoy working there. I love the students, but a lot of that goodwill will seem to be eroded when you are unquestioningly teaming up with the entity that most people in the city really despise right now. So that's my quick and dirty take. I can elaborate. What is your take?
Well, I just wanted to just clarify that so he came out and voiced strong support for 2 proposed interchanges at Tecumseh and Alameda as part of the planned south extension. He called the connections essential for regional growth despite local pushback and environmental concerns. And he specifically said that, in quotes, Harris stated that the interchanges served as crucial gateways to Norman that will magnify city prosperity and accommodate fast-growing student enrollment projected to reach 40,000. He emphasized that the locations, situated 1.5 to 2 miles from the eastern edge of campus, are vital for safely moving visitors, staff, and students. And he argued that delaying the construction of these interchanges would only drive up future infrastructure costs. My thoughts are that he's a lawyer, not a civil engineer, and no, I'm also employed by the University of Oklahoma, but I've always spoken for myself, not on behalf of OU, in that the way that these turnpikes are planned, the way that they are, all the eminent domain and all the things that go along with it are delivered through consultants is incorrect and unethical, if not sometimes illegal. And all of the things that surround the OTA have nothing in my 22 years experience have been what a true community driven best transportation planning practices have been. And it's really, I wish that he would have not entered the fray, because we've already made our point that extra interchanges not only destroy people's lives in terms of more eminent domain, but they bootstrap the citizens of Norman forever with infrastructure costs. And they're not just piddly little infrastructure costs. I mean, I can put up the associated costs. You can see, with per intersection, if you have to come off a high-speed turnpike, you're not coming off onto 2 lanes. Now you need to come off onto 4 lanes. So then you have to have, and that's both ways, so you have all these traffic lights, and then you have, the widening, and the OTA does not pay for that. The citizens of Norman would have to, in terms of increased property taxes, and everyone will tell you that our property taxes are ridiculously high already and spent, I would say, inefficiently. So my take on it was I was exceptionally disappointed to hear that come out.
I agree. And I feel like we should all be, as good academics, asking for evidence, right? It's one thing to make these claims that this is vital, but none of us have ever seen a traffic study or a revenue study that indicates this is even necessary, much less vital. And so I do feel like if you're going to lead an academic institution, you should be prepared to offer supporting evidence when you make claims that are so unpopular and that seem to go against common sense in the community.
Yeah, and we have a comment here that says he's making the development argument for eminent domain, still against the law if it were enforced. And he's a lawyer. I mean,
know.
this is like the second or third lawyer that has come out in support. A couple of them, 2 of them were in the legislature, and then now the president of OU. In 2006, we have a state Supreme Court precedent that says you cannot use eminent domain for economic development. And so what it feels like to me is that the developers really want those service roads, but the only way you can have service roads if you can get on and off the turnpike. And so now he wants more interchanges so they can have service roads, because the developers want to bust that zoning in East Norman to have high density development, even though we're only within 10,000 wells of running out of water in East Norman. And so I feel like, just like naming the East-West Connector the TOBY KEITH Expressway, like you're going, like you said, to get the will of the people to turn because it's such a popular person or employer, like the University of Oklahoma. And maybe, then the people say, well, maybe it's okay. But from a civil engineering standpoint, with a high-speed turnpike, first of all, they don't need it. We all know that. There's no traffic studies to prove that it's there. And then Cheryl, our friend Cheryl, this retired CPA, has done so many financial analysis to show that it's not fiscally responsible. It can't pay for itself. But even saying all that, you don't want to have a lot of on-offs on high-speed roadways to make it safer. If you have an 85 mile an hour speed limit, you don't want interchanges very close together. And also around the interchanges, you have all the lighting that's required. That's gonna ruin rural East Norman. You have the noise, you have the vibrations, you have, and in the watershed over the Dave Blue Creek coming in the Little River, it's just a nightmare. So I don't understand why the University of Oklahoma, if he is speaking for the University of Oklahoma, wouldn't just be happy with a interchange at Route 9. I mean, what is that, 1.5 miles from the stadium?
Right.
That's not close enough?
I feel like we really need to, at least for me, I want to zero in on and encourage people, like it's time to put on our critical thinking caps and talk about this phrase economic development and how it keeps getting used in a way that it sort of implies you dare not oppose this. And if you oppose this, you're going to make people poor and miserable. But really, that's not what is happening here. What they're calling economic development is really a land grab that will enrich a very small number of people and impose perpetual excruciating costs on the majority of the citizens. And so we always should, when people put out that economic development phrase, as if this makes it all worthwhile, you really need to follow that up with for whom, right? Because you're outlaying from an engineering point of view, like these are all the costs to the environment, to the citizens, more accidents, harm to wildlife, destruction of the water table, making parts of what is now a beautiful rural part of East Norman uninhabitable because it's got 85 mile per hour traffic. And once they build it, they're going to widen it the way that they did with the creek and the Kilpatrick. That's the goal. So it becomes this land-eating monster that will drive residents out. And so again, economic development for whom and economic costs for whom. And when I do the math, the costs are to everybody, so that a very small number of people can have momentary boom in wealth, and then they evaporate and they are not invested in the future of the community after that.
Yeah, I agree. And we put a picture up on the screen that shows, right now we have a 2-lane road with stop signs. And if we do dump off the turnpike into East Norman on these 2-lane, Alameda's a 2-lane road, Tecumseh's a 2-lane road, we're going to have to make it look like what we've shown on the bottom here. That's right around the Kickapoo. And that's going to cost a lot of money, and it's not just a one-time money, it's maintenance over time, and we can't take care of the roads we have right now. With over 12,000 center lane roadway miles in Oklahoma, we don't have enough maintenance money to take care of what we have, and yet now we're proposing this unnecessary and unneeded turnpike, number one, but then unneeded and unnecessary extra interchanges that the OTA doesn't pay for, but that makes their developer friends exceptionally happy. And I don't have a lot of information about development along the southern extension, but I know everyone's seen this graphic from Kelly. Along the east-west connector, there's a whole bunch of development that got bought up right around 2020, 2021, and they're dying for interchanges. They want them, the Rock Creek Arena, the TIF, is all tied into the turnpike, all about economic development. And I think, Tassie's right. We have to critically think about when people are saying things to us, what's their ulterior motive, and what's really happening. And I think that everybody remembers, hopefully, the fall of 2024 when the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority came in and said they wanted to put interchanges in all these areas on the east-west connector. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but they said, the 5 that we have are not enough. We need to put one on 36th. Remember the Rock Creek Arena? We want to put one on 48th. Remember that big 1 mile square school land that was mysteriously leased by 9 people who haven't released their names into a high-density housing development. And we had to go back to council 3 times in a 3-month period to say, no, we don't want the resolution of cooperation. Well, we don't need these extra interchanges along the east-west connector, and we don't need them along the southern extension for all the reasons that we've talked about so far.
I feel like we need to talk also a little bit about why real estate is such a central issue in this, and the economics of real estate and real estate development. It's very bubbly. The valuations can fluctuate massively depending on what the planning is. And so if you have advanced knowledge of a roadway coming in, if you have special knowledge that you don't share, and you go around buying up properties, you are, that should be illegal, right? Like, you're not supposed to use special knowledge. It's not a market economy. It's not a fair market, because the people who are selling to you don't know that their land is about to explode in value, but you do. And so you're using that knowledge to enrich yourself and deprive them of resources that they should have gotten. And so the other reason that real estate is so problematic is that it's the one really expensive asset class that can be bought and sold anonymously. So all this can happen with shell companies, and we don't know who is really maybe a silent partner in one of these deals, or where the money's coming from. And it's just inherently a little bit of a dirty industry. And if you talk to people who study financial crime or illicit finance, it's always like, if we had full disclosure of real estate transactions, it would be so much easier for us to do this kind of work, but we don't. And so that, to me, has always been the first and biggest red flag about the whole Turnpike situation, because the real estate developers really seem to be driving the train here, and we don't even know who they are, right? Are they even from here? Where's the money coming from? Why is everything the Turnpike Authority does so heavy-handed, so aggressive, so we'll bend whatever law? Like, it just feels like there's something really rotten in the middle of this. And again, I'm disturbed that the university seems to be swimming right in, like they don't smell it. But I think all of us out here in the community definitely smell it. So I just feel like if you're watching this, or if you're in the city and your little spidey sense is tingling that, like, yeah, something does feel really off about this, like, you're not wrong. We just can't say what it is because we don't have the tools. Because again, the anonymity of these transactions just makes it impossible to really pin down who's behind it.
Yeah, for sure. And we haven't been happy with, of course, the entire process that the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority has used since February 22nd of 2022. But in the last few weeks, they've really ramped up the nonsense. And if anyone's driven out to the South Canadian River along Tecumseh, Indian Hills, I'm sorry, where it dead ends into 72nd, you can see that they are building so quickly. I have never seen this big of an infrastructure project built as quickly as what is happening right now. They are going so fast because they know that the lawsuits we're levying and all the things they're doing wrong, I mean, could potentially catch up with them. Now, in the 77 years they've been in existence, no one has lasted long enough to take them down. That's what Pike Off OTA hopes to do. But it's pretty crazy how they got a national permit, for example, because they weren't going to be impacting the South Canadian River inside the ordinary high water mark. And yet there's silt and sand that you can clearly see going underneath their erosion control right into the water where we found, shiner, what do they call it? The
Arkansas
shiner.
River shiner,
Arkansas
endangered
River shiner.
species.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that and then their right-of-way purchasing is insane. They're doing so many unethical things that the legislature is kind of turning a blind eye to, not changing the law. But I think at some point they're crossing the law. So we'll see. But
I think they've crossed the law for
I do
decades,
several times.
and they're
Yeah.
so accustomed to it. And for whatever reason, the law just seems to be like, okay, we'll let you get away with it. And I think that disturbs me on this very existential level, that we see what looks like on so many levels law breaking, from You're not supposed to be able to offer, get $1 billion in bonds if there's pending litigation, to you should not be building a route that was never authorized by the legislature. And everybody who has the ability to establish and clearly enforce the law just seems to be like, we see nothing here. Like it's just very wrong.
Yeah, and everyone should know that, tomorrow is the Norman City Council meeting, and at 5:30 p.m., Director Joe E. Kelly from the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority will be making his debut, talking to the council about these extra interchanges that the University of Oklahoma president says that Norman needs so badly for economic development reasons. And the reason why he's coming to talk to Norman is because by statute, the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority has to have permission from the municipality with which, and the road owner, the municipality that owns the road, if they're going to put an interchange that dumps into a local road. So for example, on Indian Hills, they have to have the permission of the city. They don't. They have the permission of the Cleveland County commissioners. And they own some roads and rural some roads, but the city owns some other ones. So I just want to put up, and I'm going to put in the comments, the reason why they're coming tomorrow is because they're trying to tell the city of Norman that, well, if you want these Alameda and Tecumseh interchanges, you need to have a resolution of cooperation with us, because that's in statute 69, section 1716B, that says that the municipalities are hereby authorized and empowered to lease, lend, grant, or convey to the authority at its request the roadways that they need. And that the second part is that they have to have the consent of the governing body having jurisdiction over such street or road. They have to obtain that before they can do anything. And so I think that the University of Oklahoma president was used by the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority to ask and say it's necessary for the city of Norman. So then Joe Kelly can come back down to Norman, even though, remember, he refused to come back and talk to us in the fall of 2024. He says the people of Norman have spoken. We're just going to forget about it and build whatever we want. We don't have any time to talk with them. Well, why is he coming back now and talking? Because, again, the OTA probably doesn't really care, but the developers that make all the money in this big money ring want to have these interchanges. And of course, when you have money, you have power. And so they're asking OU to ask the city of Norman, who gets to vote on it. And if they say no, then they can't build them. So we're going to be at the city council tomorrow, and I'm going to put up where you can go to speak if you'd like to speak about that. Now, it's not an agenda item, but we want everyone to speak in miscellaneous comments and just talk about what you think about this, and why the city of Norman should not entertain a resolution of necessity with the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. And you can talk about things like the interchanges, but you can also talk about polluting our watershed. You can talk about the fact that the city of Norman has lots of state statutes to fall on when it comes to permitting and environmental impacts, especially with drinking water. So if you're available tomorrow night, we'd love for you to come. We're going to meet at 6 o'clock at the city of Norman. Wear your red shirt if you got a red shirt.
It's 5:30, right?
Oh, Dave just changed it to 6.
Okay. Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah. So do that, but we need to keep talking about the circle of corruption and the circle of influence, really, where the big money talks to the other big money, who talks to the other big money, to try to influence.
I feel like this
how it
is a
goes.
good time. This is a good time to revisit our dear old friend, Mr. Sean O'Leary, because we're back to talking about the city and how it made its decisions and how this whole project was introduced. And for those who don't know, the backstory is Sean O'Leary was the former city manager. And when all of this was first pushed upon us in February of 2022, Mr. O'Leary got up at the Crosspoint Church meeting and said some things that were demonstrably false, and then very quickly took a job with Poe and Associates, which was the engineering firm that has the whole project management contract that's there in every part of Access Oklahoma. And so I feel like the city has really failed the citizens by not focusing more on that issue, because the way that corruption works, like if you accept anything of value, including a promise of future employment, that fits the legal definition of corruption. And so when Sean O'Leary made those statements that were clearly intended to push this project forward with, in my opinion, material misrepresentations to the citizens, pressuring them to give up their homes, don't fight it, you'll get a good price. There was hardly any problems with the Kickapoo. All of that was recorded in the Norman transcript. And at what point was he offered that job at Poe and Associates? How was he incentivized to say those things, or did he sincerely believe them? And is that process still at work with our current city manager? Because the city staff, at least in the past, really seemed to have a very cozy relationship with the Turnpike Authority behind the scenes, including our county commissioners who went to that December 2021 OTA board meeting where these things were sort of talked about. Like we see the sign-in logs that they were there in the building, but they never shared that information with citizens. Everybody pretended that, again, at that same Crosspoint Church meeting, David Streb said these plans are only 9 days old. Well, we now know from open records that they were planning this in May of 2021, at least. They called it driving forward too. And so at what point have our city officials been privy to private conversations? Have they been promised anything of value, including future employment at one of the many companies that stands to benefit from these projects? And if you are a citizen and you have been kept in the dark about this by your elected representatives or by the city staff, you should show up to the city council meeting and demand facts and evidence and information, because that is absolutely your right. And you cannot make informed decisions without full disclosure of these kinds of conversations ahead of time.
Yeah, and we open record requested those conversations and emails, and well, either they somehow disappeared into a black hole, or we were given some emails that insinuated that they had been talking in another channel, not on the city's servers and things, but a lot of people carry 2 phones. And I'm just saying, like, the emails that went back into 2021 showed without a doubt that our city staff was talking with them. So it's really easy to see when you look for it, what they're doing behind our backs, and then turning to our city council people on our faces and saying, oh no, they didn't do that. But it's really difficult. And I guess, Tassie, we always talk about this, but my problem with the whole thing is, I have lots of problems with it, but my biggest problem is we've identified all of these bad things. And all of the people that can do something about that, the judicial system, our elected officials, even the legal system, have said, we just close their eyes.
We see nothing.
We see nothing, yeah.
Yeah, and that is paired with trying to paint us as some kind of fringe group that is weird or unpredictable or untrustworthy. We're just like middle-aged women. We just don't think there should be a ginormous highway out here that does not work from an engineering point of view, an environmental point of view, a rural Norman point of view, an appreciating wildlife point of view. And that's it, right? Like, it should not be this hard for citizens to stop a highway project that is this bad. So why? Why are we still here?
I know, and I was talking to my husband this morning about, like, I just think too rationally, I guess. My biggest problem was that the state Supreme Court intellectually dishonestly adjudicated our legal argument that the Southern Extension wasn't even legal in statute.
Right.
And we know it wasn't because they tried to change it in 1999, and Neil McCaleb, who was then the Secretary of Transportation, the Director of ODOT, and the Director of the OTA at the same time, said the city, in a newspaper article, said, the city of Norman has spoken. They do not want this, so we will not build it. And then they tagged that specific authorization to the H.E. Bailey spur, because that's what it is. Okay?
Right.
And now 22 years later, 23 years later, the Oklahoma State Supreme Court can't understand cartography and geography and south and east, the differences between south and east and west and north. And they say, oh, they can, and then even they can double count that statute. When that happened, I didn't even know what to do, because that is just incorrect. There's no interpretation. There's no
Right.
other interpretation of that. The citizens were correct. They had no legal basis. And
Right.
yet, 6 Supreme Court members who have been serving for decades used a Chevron doctrine-like opinion, which means that they give the agency discretion to do whatever they want and completely untether them from the legislature. It's like the people honestly had no voice.
Right.
After they had overturned the appeal on our winning Open Meetings Act violation, which you were the lead plaintiff for that. So I'm hoping federal court at least has some intellectually honest brains and can make the right decisions.
Right. I mean, even, and I know that this was talked about last week, but just the change in the Council of Bond Oversight from no, you cannot have a $1 billion bond issue with pending litigation to, yeah, okay, we just, it's programmatic, so you just get your $1 billion. We don't see anything here. Like, what?
Yeah, and I left a Facebook post on one of Drummond's campaign little reels that he had with our favorite transportation cartel lobbyist, that he literally, his office sits on the Council for Bond Oversight.
Right.
So
And did nothing.
And did nothing. You're telling me that your attorney didn't understand the law, the clear law that says bonds will be denied if there is threatened or pending litigation. So how is governor, I asked him something like, so how, if you become our governor, what are you going to do to right the ship? Obviously hanging out with this kind of people is not going to do that for us, But
Yeah, I also have serious misgivings. I mean, I've mentioned this before, but I do feel like it's worth mentioning again. I did my PhD research in Cuba, and when you live in an authoritarian country, you just see all the workarounds that people develop. Like you can't openly criticize the government, but people have all this kind of like linguistic wordplay and these funny little workarounds and all this like subterranean humor, and they are constantly criticizing the government. They're just always looking for that line, that's like it's close to the line, but it doesn't cross it. And I just feel like the Trump-like authority operates the same way, right? Like you cannot get elected if you are openly opposed to them, no matter what they do. And it just feels like this invisible force that bends all of the other branches of government to its will and deprives the citizens. It makes me at least feel like I'm back in Cuba again, where like, okay, there's this giant authoritarian presence that on the one hand is scary, on the other hand is just so colossally stupid that you can't not make fun of it. But at the same time, that there is this real power and that they do operate by fear and intimidation of critics. And so it feels like a really weird, I may be triggering my post-communist PTSD or something, but it's a strange psychological space. And I feel like we need to talk about it because when I see how many people have just surrendered and sold because that's easier, I don't think we should be doing that. Like, we are American citizens. We do still have the right to criticize government agencies that are acting outside the law, and don't let that go, right? Because as soon as you let that go, like, it just creates this cascade. So please hold whoever your choice for governor is, ask them very pointed questions about this agency and how they intend to restore the rule of law to transportation in Oklahoma. There's my little sermon.
yeah, for sure, because someone has to, and I think that the last 4.5 years have shown the people that citizen groups can affect change. We almost did. I swear the Supreme Court justices, the word on the street was that they were ruling 5-4 in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
And then
and a certain lobbyist made a new friend or something happened.
Made a new friend and made some phone calls, and there was some elected officials that made some phone calls, and all of a sudden it went from 5-4, the good guys win, to 6-3, the OTA gets what they want with a terribly written majority opinion that just literally said, broad agency deference. We've never told them where to build before. We're not going to start now, even though they were specifically asked to adjudicate the legality of the location authorization. And so at that point, I feel like the Attorney General should have stepped in and at least made a public statement, like, I don't agree with this or whatever. And then I think I made this point the other day that with the Open Meetings Act, when we won that on summary judgment, y'all won that on summary judgment, clear-cut violation. The Attorney General's office used that case in all of they do a quarterly Open Meetings Act webinars and meetings. That literally made their book. And when the Supreme Court overturned it, they said nothing. And they still have that Open Meetings Act violation example of ours in their book that they say, don't do this because this is really bad.
So a bad Supreme Court ruling throws the entire system into chaos, right? Because nobody knows anymore. Like, this thing was so clear cut until somebody somewhere was like, well, let's just bend this law. But now nobody knows what that line is anymore. And I mean, on a personal note, I was in the Cleveland County Courthouse. It might have been at our key tam hearing. And there was this very prolonged conversation between, I think it was Philip Whaley, the OTA's attorney, and the judge. And they were arguing about the breakout of the Hirschfeld case. And I kept thinking, like, I'm right here. This is weird to hear myself talked about in this way. And I feel that way whenever I see, like the case mentioned. I feel like it should have been an opportunity for the people who care about these things to say, here is this hard line in the sand that you cannot plan ginormous things in secret, which we have all the evidence that you did. The judge agreed, summary judgment. And that would have really added clarity going forward. But now we just have uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds fear, and people pull back and feel like, well, I'm not going to push this issue with a turnpike. So now everybody's back to planning things in secret again because they know they can get away with it. So how is this helping citizens? Like, how is this democratic? Are we going to let this not just undemocratic, but anti-democratic coalition continue to grow and expand? We're feeding it billions of dollars. It's grabbing more and more land. It's on a growth spurt. And why should we be okay with this? I personally am not. I'm disturbed that the university is part of it.
Yeah, I agree. And about the people selling because they just want to be out from under it, I'm like you. I say fight until the end. Like, let them take you to eminent domain. Let them condemn your property, and then take them to court. And people are so worried about the legal costs, but honestly, if you look at the Kickapoo, we talked about this before.
Yeah.
People that take the OTA to court, largely make a ton more money when they're done. And then people are saying, well, you can't win. No one's ever won before. But if that attitude kept up over history, America wouldn't be here today. And you can't fight the king, and you can't fight all these things. You can stand up and fight. And I think I'm looking back at our time and thinking, if we eventually lose, then we'll have done everything we could. But I don't want to ever look back and say we should have done this or we should have done that. You got to
right, or that we gave up too soon.
Or we gave up.
If
too
anything,
soon.
I'm all on team give up too late.
Yeah. But so if anybody's available tomorrow, again, 6:00, wear red, sign up to talk, or just come to support. It won't be a very late meeting, I wouldn't think, because there aren't very many things on the agenda. Yeah, and Trey Kirby, he's our Ward 5 representative. He says 13 other states have won. Let's be number 14. There's lots of people, lots of states that have stopped transportation projects. We can do it.
I will, put a shout out to my home state of Kentucky, which has a lot of cultural similarities with Oklahoma. That's why I like it here. But, Kentucky had a toll road that was the Bluegrass Parkway. We would always take it to visit my grandmother, and they paid off the bonds, and it's now free. And as God intended, right? Like, it's not that hard. It just takes courage, it takes integrity, and it takes the people who have these things being very clear to the people who don't. And that's why we want you to come to the city council meeting tomorrow, because I've spent enough time with people in Ward 5 and with Pykoff and all of it to know that we are the people who have the courage and the integrity to just like stand up and say no. Like, there is another way to do this that benefits everybody. We don't have to have this level of intrusion and disruption and pollution and wild overspending and financial mismanagement. Like, there's a better way. And it's a simple word. It's just no.
For sure. And, you know, we talk about the history a lot because understanding the history kind of makes you understand what's about to happen next. And when I was talking with Cheryl the other day, we were talking about how the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority pretty much followed the rules up until like the early 80s. And then all of a sudden, stuff started going off the rails and no one stopped them. And so then they went off the rails a little more. And then by the time the Driving Forward program came in the Kickapoo, the 2016, then they really went off the rails with everything, real estate, money, budget, the fact that it wasn't even authorized. They couldn't do it because it was part of that outer loop that they had to do with one bond issue in the 80s. And so now they got away with that. Now they're even pushing more with what they're trying to do right here. And so I think it is the line in the sand. Like, we stand up and hopefully the pins start dropping in our direction where we're forcing them. I mean, it would be great if we forced them to do an environmental impact statement on that southern Canadian river.
And it shouldn't be that hard. Like, they have been telling us that, oh yes, we care so much about the environment, yet we have never seen it. They have not done it. They've done shenanigans with the permitting so that they don't have to. So it's the barest minimum you could ask.
Yeah. So hopefully you'll be there tomorrow, and we'll just make our wishes known again and give information and facts so that the city council can make the best decision, hopefully the right decision. But do you want to go back in time to kind of like where all this
Sure.
maybe this kind of nonsense started?
Well, I mean, I will add an addendum. Cheryl's right, and that they've gone progressively farther off the rails and been enabled by everyone since the 80s. But it's also worth remembering that Governor David Hall went to jail for taking kickbacks on the Cimarron Turnpike construction. We tend to forget Governor Hall for a reason, I think. And in those days, the state's Democratic Party was all powerful. It was mostly a one-party state. And I think that we have Senator Gene Stipe to thank for a lot of that. And so not much has been written about Gene Stipe. I have done a lot of research and we'll hopefully have something coming out. But one of the core things about Senator Stipe is, one, he controlled transportation because he chaired the Senate Transportation Committee for his, I think it was 40 years in office. All of the documents, historical documents that I've seen, including pages from his FBI file, which I got via Freedom of Information Act request, include language like he personally got kickbacks from every business, licit and illicit, in southeastern Oklahoma. And so that he used his political power to provide protection for various nefarious enterprises, let's just say. And then that power meant more money, and the money meant more power, so that as his career grew, he just became untouchable. And when you look at him in retrospect, you can see why we were a one-party state, because the Democratic Party and Gene Stipe were very intertwined. There were other pockets, but for the most part, he was kind of the invisible power behind the party, and you really couldn't do much without his approval, and you didn't get his approval unless there was some shenanigan that he was getting a piece of. And so to me, this story encapsulates the risks of one-party rule, that why a multi-party system is much healthier. And I know that in many ways, Gene Stipe's shenanigans and corruption polluted the Democratic Party's brand quite a bit, and we have not had a Democrat win a statewide election in a long time. However, so this is not a push for the Democratic Party, it's just a push for plurality, because that's how you get checks and balances. And so the Turnpike's ability to grow like a cancer really coincides with the centralization of power just in one party. So all it takes, in my opinion, is just a critical mass of citizens to be like, wow, maybe this party isn't representing me right now. Or maybe I need to be more clear that it needs to represent me and not sort of be so easily co-opted. Because what we saw with Gene Stipe is that behind the scenes, there was just like a state within the state that was his personal fiefdom. And that's not a democracy when that happens. There were business owners who were driven into bankruptcy just for opposing him. If you opposed him in the legislature, he would target your business, and he had the ability to do that. So I think all of us just need to recognize that collectively we want to live in a society where that's not the case. And the way that we do that, again, it's a simple word, no, and enough. And that's how we start trying to rebalance the ship a little bit. So I can go into more detail on Gene Stipe's corruption, probably too much. Maybe we'll save that for another episode. But if anybody has any of their own memories of this, feel free to send them my way, because I am collecting these stories, and I think that they do need to be shared on the state level so that we don't make those same mistakes again.
Was Gene Stipe a part of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority officially at any point?
No, but via the Senate Transportation Committee. Well, here's officially no, but unofficially, when another member of the legislature complained about trying to get records about what seemed to be a crazy turnpike criminal thing, they were told by the Turnpike Authority they had to go through Gene Stipe. And that to me tells me everything I need to know about the actual power that he wielded, how he wielded it. And so, again, officially, there was a governing board. Unofficially, it was him and his criminal enterprises really seemed to have a hand in every single thing that they did.
And was he a banker?
No.
Oh, he wasn't a banker.
Well, he had banks, he had real estate, he had all kinds of things. Again, think of it this way, like every business, and that means restaurant, coffee shop, gas station, whatever, as well as smuggling operation, all of it in southeastern Oklahoma, he had a piece of. So if you were an aspiring criminal and you wanted to smuggle something through Gene Stipe's territory and you didn't give him a piece, you were absolutely going to get arrested and go to jail. But if you did, you had a very good chance of getting away with it. And so it just kind of worked that way. There was a restaurant, I think in McAllister, that didn't like Gene Stipe, and they kept having their water shut off by the city, right? Like, so, I mean, it's that level of, he would torment you intentionally. He was very crafty, and he would demand tribute, including from all of the state's political bigwigs at multiple banquets where they were supposed to give speeches about how much they admired him. But when you read these speeches, they're so full of like double meanings. And it's clearly like very backhanded praise, but that seemed to be enough to keep him happy. So anyway, I just feel like knowing more of that history helps explain a little bit about where we are right now. The Turnpike has always sort of had this element to it. If you read Governor Bellman's autobiography, like he talks about coming up against the Turnpike Authority, and that he's not exactly sure what happened, but he buckles under, right? So some kind of pressure is being exerted.
Yeah, Henry Bellman's autobiography, if you haven't read it, it's pretty interesting. And there's one part where the citizens launch a lawsuit against the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. They're going against the bond validation. So, like, the Turnpike Authority was going to build some turnpike, I forget which one it was, and the citizens said, no, you can't do that. But the Supreme Court was on a golf course. And so they went to the golf course and came back in. The OTA got them and said, you need to come back and vote on this so we can go get our bonds, because we need to have a good rate. And they came back from the OTA was able to call the state Supreme Court members back from whatever they were at their retreat and make them levy an opinion that they could have their bonds for this particular turnpike. And that was in the 60s, and we all know that in the 60s, the Supreme Court, 3 of the justices got their hands slapped, and one of them, I think, almost went to jail and was fined for
I think
taking
one did
bribes.
yeah. And I read that book, and my favorite little vignette from that is like one of the Supreme Court justices who was taking the bribes, he was the main one, And for one court decision, somebody paid him, I forget how much, like maybe, I'll just make this up, $100,000. And it was supposed to be split 3 ways to get 3 votes. Well, he kept almost all of it himself. And then under oath, like the attorney asked him, prosecutor, like, why why didn't you share with your colleagues? And he said, I just wanted to keep it, I guess. So he had a moment of honesty, which I appreciate. But honestly, as a state, I think we can do better than that, right? Like the history of corruption in Oklahoma is really spectacular. It rivals Louisiana's. It just hasn't been written about in the same way. And again, it strangles the life. We cannot have economic development with this level of corruption. It's just like a parasite in the system, sucking up all the energy and the nutrients and taking it somewhere else to offshore accounts or other states or whatever. So what they're promising you is wealth for the citizens via economic development. That is absolutely not what happens unless you get the corruption under control. And so in the case of that Texas Turnpike, the private toll road they tried to build that started buckling immediately because they had used substandard materials. And that is what you get when you get substandard materials and supply chains, and things get very unsafe. And the fact that this is happening around the Canadian River and Lake Thunderbird, like this could potentially, if they continue to ignore environmental concerns, just make the city unlivable, right? And that is not what any of us want or need. So just showing up, being heard, writing letters, you may feel like, well, there's no point. They've gotten this far, they have all the momentum. And it does kind of feel that way, but that's not a reason to be quiet. It's not a reason to surrender. If anything, it's just a reason to keep talking a little bit louder.
Yeah, and if you are affected by this turnpike or you know of people that are affected by this turnpike, please let us know about Pike Off OTA, and please tell them to come to the City of Norman meeting tomorrow to meet everybody. And we have events throughout the year, and we need people to go to City of Norman Tuesday night meetings. We need people to go to the Cleveland County Commission meetings on Mondays, the first Monday of every month. We need people to go to the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority Board meetings, because we have a member, Dave, and he records everything and he puts it up on our YouTube channel, because all these agencies that we've been talking about don't want the citizens to know and don't provide the information afterwards. For example, at the Council for Bond Oversight, we asked them for their packet of information that they gave to the counselors to make a decision. And they told us, no, you're going to have to go through an open record request. But yet the press people that were covering the press, they had the packet, but they wouldn't give it to the citizens right there. And so how is that an open meetings, not a
Right.
open meetings violation? You know what I'm saying? So we had somebody video that whole thing with their phone so we could be sure to understand what the bond advisor was saying to the council, and we could see their faces and understand what was going on. So we do need a lot of people that want to stay in this fight and want to help in the way that they can. And it could be as simple as videoing a meeting. It could be as much as speaking at one of the meetings. So really, so come out and meet us and keep the fight up is what I think Tassie and I are saying, and Kelly will always say, because I feel like you don't lose until you stop fighting.
Right. And some things are worth fighting for. And, again, every single aspect from February 2022 to now, we have 4.5 years of lawlessness, chaos, wild overspending, financial mismanagement, what appears to be massive law breaking. Like somebody has to say no. So it's me.
Right, for sure.
Even if I'm the only one.
Well, we're all stick together, even though, so Tassie was under the original Southern Extension. She just lives directly south of me. I was under that, and Randy, and all the people that are still in the fight, we're still trying to get it stopped, even though our homes are no longer in the path. And so we do hope that we can make some headway there. So besides just reminding everybody about the meeting tomorrow, and then remembering that you have to vote again on Tuesday, August 25th for that primary. Is there anything else that we want to talk about today?
Welcome to the new school year.
Welcome to the new school year. Yeah, the public schools start this Thursday. Some of my kids start next week, and then OU starts the 24th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will be teaching a new class on white collar crime.
Ooh, that sounds fun. I was hoping to, I wanted to do ethical road building in the Honors College, but I have to teach such a big class. I'm going to try to fit it in one semester. I think that would be fun to have a 20-person, do
Yes.
lots of reading, because they restrict the size of the classes in the Honors College, and talk about ethics and transportation planning, or some kind of ethics and road building, and that read a lot of the really good old books on Robert Moses and some of the
Right.
old stuff. Yeah, is yours
Yeah.
mainly, is yours going to be a lot of book reading, and then I hear your
Book
dogs?
reading and some, yeah, my dogs are telling me it's time. They're very good timekeepers. Some open source research techniques, and focusing in, they'll get to choose like which sector, whether it's going to be healthcare, construction, real estate, et cetera. They can do past or present. It's much easier to see these kinds of things in the past when cases are adjudicated. So teaching them how to like retrieve records. There's a lot.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds fun. I want to take that class.
Everybody I talk to says that because I think we just all feel like we need these skills right now, you know,
Yeah.
and having learned a little bit of forensic accounting, like I always want more. So whatever little bit I know, I feel obligated to pass on.
Well, great. Well, thank you for joining today, and it's always awesome to talk to you and hear your thoughts. So we will be back next Monday at 10 a.m. probably, and hopefully we have some news for you on our pending lawsuit across the South Canadian. We haven't heard anything yet. The judge hasn't made any decision, but we're hoping this week maybe it gets into his docket and he makes some kind of move.
Let's hope. And if
Okay.
not, onward.
Onward, we still keep fighting. So hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow, 6 o'clock. Wear red at the City of Norman Chambers.
Yeah.
All
See you
right.
there.
All right, take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Right of Way Report, a podcast by Pike Off OTA. You can join us here every Monday morning at 10 a.m., where we will bring you updates on legislation, litigation, and landowner information.